Welcome to the show. Today we are going over why the Chicago Bears quarterback Caleb Williams just became the best quarterback in the NFC North. And this isn't BS. This isn't just because of the Bears stuff you see in the background. This is based off fundamentally because of the pieces that are around someone. No one is going to argue that Caleb Williams has more athleticism than any of the quarterbacks in the division now, J.J. McCarthy or with Jared Goff, right? No one is going to be debating that, or Jordan Love. Caleb Williams was the first overall pick. Jared Goff was the first overall pick. We could talk about arm talent in terms of what they have, but the pieces around Jared Goff are what make him pretty enticing. The pieces around J.J. McCarthy that were the resources which Sam Darnold had last season, that is exactly what made him pretty good. T.J. Hawkinson, Justin Jefferson, Jordan Addison. Look at the Lions. Amon-Ra St. Brown, Jameson Williams, Montgomery, Gibbs, Laporta, who had a bit of a down year, to be honest with you. And then we look at the roster comparisons. Chicago had been outgunned. They had assumed a little bit too much of what their offensive line was and had assumed a little bit more of what their receiving core had been. This was truly a mistake. People said they won the offseason when they made the pickup of Keenan Allen. Remember, this was a team that needed wide receiver depth, and people were talking about Keenan Allen, who just came off a 1,300-yard season and 7 touchdowns with the Chargers, as if he was still the same guy he had been previously, because that was his best year. But guy has a little bit of a down year, with an offensive line that's struggling, with turmoil within the organization in terms of from a leadership standpoint, things start to happen. So let's slow down and compose the number one reason. It is because of the roster. We talk about the weapons. Would love to hear immediately what you have to say in the comments, but let's go through it. I talked about Jefferson. I talked about Addison, Hawkinson. Sure. I know everyone is going to talk about the running backs, but this is not what it's about. The run game, it does help a quarterback, that is for sure, but they are not going to make or break a quarterback being the best or the second best in the division. That quarterback is going to remain at that place. We also have to talk about coaches, LaFleur and Kevin O'Connell, and then Dan Campbell, all offensive backgrounds. And number 4, Ben Johnson, all of these guys, offensive type people, they're going to want to open it up and score a whole bunch of points. Offense first. That is not what Chicago has been the last couple of years with Eberflus. Bears fans will have to thank him for making that swing on Rome Odunze, because now Chicago has DJ Moore, Rome Odunze, and their second rounder, Luther Burden. To maybe the detriment overall that they didn't get a running back like Quinshon Judkins or Travion Henderson in the second round, the benefit to Caleb Williams being the best quarterback in the division just got up because he has elite wide receivers. Luther Burden could potentially be better than DJ. He could be better than Rome. It's not likely that it will happen, but at this point, he has the talent to be able to compete for the most targets within that offense. Rome is just a second-year player. DJ is still trying to find his way to being what he was 2 years ago with Justin Fields. This is a completely different quarterback situation, and they had struggled to find ways to incorporate DJ consistently in that offense. That's not the case with the Lions, right? They know Amon-Ra is the guy, and they're going to continue to run the football, but what about Minnesota? They're in a similar type of deal with their quarterback. J.J. McCarthy was not throwing passes in the regular season a season ago. And then if you look at the Green Bay Packers, Jordan Love, that receiving room, are you going to be confident in saying that Matthew Golden, Christian Watson, Jaden Reed are a better trio of wide receivers, right? Throw in Tucker Kraft to Chicago's with Luther Burden, Rome Odunze, and DJ Moore. And we could say Kmet, Loveland, slice it in two, but be honest with yourself. And we're talking about the talent there. And I'm confidently able to say this because of where they were taken in the draft. The wide receiver position does not lie. It's not like quarterbacks where you could potentially take a guy higher than where they are. The Bears had needs. They could have gone edge rusher. Mike Green was still on the board at 39. They could have gone with offensive lineman, which they did in the second round a little bit later. They could have gone with a running back. Caleb Johnson was still on the board. R.J. Harvey was still on the board. Could have gone corner or defensive back. Xavier Watts was on the board. I believe Morrison was still on the board. Will Johnson was still on the board. All these players. And Chicago decides to go with, you know what? We're going to try and have the best quarterback in the division next season. That is how we're going to win it. They're coming at this from the perspective that in order to win the division, it's not about defensive sacks like you can lead the league with, or it's not about the number of rushing yards. It is going to be about expected play average of scoring, the percentage of that, and Luther Burden adding that fundamental element. All right, Minnesota goes with Donovan Jackson. Detroit goes with Tyler Williams in the trenches. But Chicago goes with a playmaker in both rounds. It's a sexier pick. I'm not going to lie to you. Taking a high-flying tight end that was high up in the voting for best tight ends in college football, that had a ton of production as a national champion, and then taking a wide receiver that had a terrific college career, ran a 4.41 40-yard dash, that isn't going to be those are star type picks. Those are picks that get fans very much excited because it's an offensive league. I can remember back to 2018, the Bears took Roquan Smith, and that was more exciting than this because of the defense. That's where it was oriented around, and how good were those Chicago Bears offenses? Yeah, they could have used a couple of playmakers. So overall, sure, the Lions have a better run game than Chicago. Well, okay, Josh Jacobs probably better than DeAndre Swift. Minnesota, Aaron Jones, they probably have a better run game overall. But this is a weapons league. We're oriented around the second highest paid position in football now. It's pretty much a tie between wide receiver and edge rusher. So who's got the best edge rushers? Who's got the best wide receivers? We're talking about the offensive side and putting together those pieces, and them specifically being young with the chance to play together for a long time. And not to mention, the number one thing that we've talked about is the weapons. What about the wall? What about the work that is done in front of them? If Caleb had that type of season, and looking up the stats right now, I want to say off the top, 20 touchdowns, 6 interceptions, an 87 rating in a horrible year. 65% completion, 62% completion. That was a terrible year from Caleb Williams, right? That's what it's been painted as. That should have taken Jayden Daniels, right? They should have definitely gone that direction, really. To have a 3.33 to 1 touchdown to interception ratio at that offensive line, the most sacked quarterback in Chicago Bears history, 68 times starting every single game. You're going to have trouble saying with a straight face that offensive line, after picking up Drew Dahlman, Joe Tooney, Jonah Jackson, adding a little bit of depth, is not going to be a starting offensive line unit for the Chicago Bears. And again, you can see the stuff in the background and say that this is all bias. I made an entire video that stated that the Packers made a great pick taking Matthew Golden. He is going to provide an element we have not seen from Green Bay in over 10 years at the wide receiver position. They haven't had that burner just fly down the 4.29 speed. When has Green Bay had that? They've had Devontae Adams, the best route runner, but not a Matthew Golden. Look, I love that pick. And that is a terrific selection. I can say that. I can say that confidently. Look, Jared Goff's going to be better with an interior guy such as Rutledge filling into the rotating interior of that offensive line. They're going to be better for it. The Minnesota Vikings, I'm an Ohio State fan. Donovan Jackson is one of the more underrated picks in the entire NFL draft. He was maybe the MVP of that entire Ohio State Buckeye run after they lost their left tackle. Pick 32, Josh Simmons. Get what I'm saying here? he had to bump out to left tackle. All these teams made very high profile and good selections. If you're a fan of the Big Ten, you're watching 3 of those 4 picks happen, and then you probably knew what Matthew Golden was when he got selected. So overall, to sum up all of my points, the quarterback position is now built around talent at the wide receiver and especially tight end spot. And we know how good Laporta has been, right? That's a great choice. Hawkinson, well documented. Obviously, he's been tremendous. Kraft has had the experience of playing at a high level, but none of them are too deep, like fully, and none of them are 3 deep with legit wide receiver weapons. And Ben Johnson is right there with LaFleur now for best offensive type minds, and obviously O'Connell and Campbell, all of them are right there for best offensive minds in the NFC and all of the NFL. So it'll be fascinating to see the way it plays out, and you can come back to this when the 2025 season is in week 8. We will know who the best quarterback is. You can come back to this, and maybe I'm very well wrong of what is about to happen with the offseason and the way the season plays out, but I very much so doubt it. Thank you so much for watching. I hope there's a bunch of Packer fans calling me crazy for this. Hope there's a bunch of Detroit and upset Minnesota Viking fans saying that this is ridiculous. But again, that's what it's all about, spreading love and fun for the game, which we all love, that is football. So appreciate you for watching, and make sure to subscribe for more football content coming out in the future. Thanks.